You smell like chemical sludge. Don't embarrass Brandon. Eat in the garage. My mother blocked the front door with her hand, refusing to let me step inside the house I was paying for. I was still holding the heavy catering trays she had ordered me to pick up after my shift at the waste plant. She looked at my steel-toe boots, then at the new Persian rug my money had bought and sneered. She shoved a plastic plate of leftovers into my hands and pointed toward the unheated detached garage. I was good enough to pay the bills but not good enough to be seen. I didn't argue. I took the scraps, walked to the freezing garage, and watched through the window as my family feasted in the warmth I provided. Before I tell you exactly how I turned that garage dinner into their eviction notice, I want to know, what is the most disrespectful thing a family member has ever said to you? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every single one. I sat in my car, the engine off, the garage temperature dropping rapidly to match the frozen Chicago night outside. My breath hung in the air like smoke. I didn't turn the heat on. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating the spreadsheet I had updated faithfully on the first of every month for 4 years. I called it the invisible ledger. To my family, I was just Rose, the daughter who worked a dirty job and sometimes helped out with bills. To the spreadsheet, I was the primary investor in the Cynthia and Brandon Lifestyle Fund. I ran my finger down the columns. Mortgage payments, 48 months at $1,200. Utilities. Property tax adjustments. Emergency roof repairs. The total sat at the bottom in bold red text, $62,500. That number wasn't just money. It was shifts I picked up on Christmas Eve while they opened presents. It was the vacation I canceled. It was the nights I spent smelling like landfill runoff so they could smell like expensive perfume. My phone rang in my hand. It was my mother. She was calling me from inside the house, less than 20 feet away through a thin wall of drywall and insulation. Rose, she said, her voice tight, not with apology but with stress. We have a situation. Brandon's partners are talking about a summer retreat. We need to book a yacht for the launch party next week to secure the booking. It's $15,000 for the deposit. I stared at the dashboard. $15,000. She wasn't asking how I was doing in the freezing garage. She wasn't asking if I had enough to eat. She was asking for $15,000 so my brother, the doctor who was secretly drowning in debt, could pretend to be a tycoon. $15,000, I repeated, my voice flat. It's an investment, Rose, she snapped, anticipating resistance. It's for the family image. Once Brandon secures these partners, everything will change. We just need to bridge the gap. Don't be selfish. Selfish. The word usually triggered a reflex in me, a desperate need to prove I was good, that I was worthy. But tonight in the cold something snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was quiet, like a wire finally cutting through bone. I looked at the $62,000 on my screen. If I gave her this money, the total would be nearly $80,000. I could scream. I could storm in there and throw the catering tray at the wall. That would be hot revenge. It would feel good for 5 minutes and then they would call the police, paint me as the unstable, jealous sister and cut me off. I would lose everything I had invested. But there was another way. Cold revenge. If I gave her the money without conditions, I was a victim. But if I gave her the money with the right paperwork, I was a creditor. $15,000 wasn't a gift. It was the purchase price for my freedom. It was the cost of the weapon that would finally end this war. I have the money, I said. The silence on the other end was greedy, expectant. I can transfer it tomorrow. Good, Cynthia breathed out. I knew you'd understand. But Mom, I cut in, my voice trembling just enough to sound submissive. That's a lot of cash. My accountant is already on my back about audits. If I move that much money without documentation, the IRS will flag me. I need you to sign a gift waiver. It just tells the government the money is a family transfer, not income. Fine, whatever, she dismissed. Just bring the paper. It has to be notarized, I said. Bank policy for transfers over $10,000. Meet me at Chase Bank tomorrow morning at 9. I'll have the check in the waiver. Ugh, Rose, I have a facial at 11, she complained. Fine. 9 o'clock. Don't be late. She hung up. I lowered the phone. My hands were steady now. She thought she was getting a yacht deposit. She didn't know she had just agreed to sign away her kingdom. I backed my car out of the driveway, leaving the warm glow of the house behind. The drive to my apartment was only 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing a border between two different worlds. My apartment complex wasn't fancy. It was a square brick building near the industrial district, the kind of place where you could hear the neighbors arguing through the walls. But it was clean, it was warm, and most importantly, I paid the rent with money that no one else could claim. As I unlocked my door and stepped into the quiet, the smell of lavender detergent from my own laundry greeted me, erasing the phantom stench of the landfill. I sat on my second-hand sofa and closed my eyes, letting the ghost of the last 4 years wash over me. It started the week after Dad died. We were all sitting in the living room, me, Mom, and Brandon. Mom was weeping about how we were going to lose everything. Dad had leveraged the house to the hilt to pay for Brandon's pre-med undergraduate tuition, and there was no life insurance. The foreclosure notice was already on the coffee table. Brandon, fresh into medical school and full of arrogance, had just shrugged. "I can't work," he'd said, adjusting his expensive watch. "I have rotations. My residency is going to be brutal. I'm the future of this family, Mom. I have to focus." So the eyes turned to me. I was 21, fresh out of an engineering program with a job offer at the waste management plant. It wasn't the glamorous architecture firm I had dreamed of. It was processing logistics and sludge. But it paid overtime. "I'll handle it," I had whispered. That was the contract I signed in my blood. For 4 years I worked the graveyard shift. I spent my nights monitoring conveyor belts of refuse, breathing in air that tasted like sulfur and rot. I missed Christmases because holiday pay was double time. I missed my best friend's wedding because I needed to cover the property tax hike. I scrubbed my skin raw with steel wool every morning, terrified that the smell of garbage was seeping out of my pores. And while I was drowning in trash to keep a roof over their heads, Brandon was living the life of a golden boy. I opened my phone and scrolled back through the successful kids group chat, the one I was only allowed to be in so they could ask me for errands. I found a message from 2 years ago. It was a photo of Brandon in scrubs, holding a latte captioned, "Saving lives while Rose saves the landfills." Someone has to be the garbage girl, I guess. Mom had reacted with a heart emoji. I looked at the photo, then at my own hands. My knuckles were dry and cracked from the industrial soap. I wasn't just the garbage girl. I was the bank. I was the safety net. I was the foundation that held up their entire fragile, ego-driven world. Brandon wasn't a rich doctor. He was a broke resident drowning in student loans, relying on Mom's credit cards, which were paid off by my mortgage contributions. They didn't hate me because I was a failure. They hated me because I was the witness. Every time they looked at me, they saw the truth of their own dependency. They had to make me small so they could feel big. I closed the laptop. The $62,500 I had poured into that house wasn't charity. It was equity. I had bought every brick, every beam, every inch of copper wire in those walls. Tomorrow at the bank, I wasn't stealing their home. I was simply foreclosing on a bad investment. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours until sunrise triple-checking the documents. I ironed my work uniform, the navy blue jumpsuit with the waste management logo on the chest. I polished my steel-toe boots until they shined. At 8:45 in the morning, I walked into Chase Bank. The lobby was quiet, smelling of floor wax and money. I stood near the entrance, a stark contrast to the suits and ties moving past me. Cynthia arrived at 9 o'clock on the dot. She swept in wearing oversized sunglasses and a cashmere coat that cost more than my first car. She looked around the lobby with distaste until her eyes landed on me. Her lip curled. "Rose," she hissed, marching over. "Why are you wearing that? You look like you just crawled out of a dumpster." "I have a shift at noon," I said, my voice calm. I didn't have time to change. "Well, try to stand in the corner so people don't think we're together," she muttered, adjusting her sunglasses. "Do you have the check?" "Right here." I patted the thick manila envelope in my hand. We sat down at a desk with a young notary named David. He looked tired, his tie slightly askew. I placed the envelope on the desk and pulled out a stack of papers thick enough to choke a horse. "What is all this?" Cynthia asked, eyeing the pile warily. "I thought it was just a gift waiver." "It is," I lied smoothly. "But since the amount is over $10,000, the IRS requires a solvency statement, a source of funds affidavit, and a familial relationship confirmation. It's standard. Just bureaucratic nonsense." I started sliding papers across the desk, keeping up a steady stream of chatter. "Sign here, Mom. Initial here. Date here. Sorry, I know it's a pain. My accountant is a stickler." Cynthia sighed, grabbing the pen. She signed page after page without reading a single word, her eyes darting to the check that sat tantalizingly at the edge of the desk. She was so focused on the money, so blinded by her own greed and impatience, that she didn't notice when I slipped the quitclaim deed into the mix. The document was titled in bold, black letters, "Quitclaim Deed," but I had clipped a gift tax form cover sheet over the top half, leaving only the signature line exposed. "Sign here," I said, pointing to the line. David the notary frowned. He adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "Ma'am," he said to Cynthia. "Just to be clear, do you understand that this document transfers the title of the property located at?" Cynthia cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. Yes, I know what it is. It's the tax loophole thing. My daughter explained it. I know what I'm doing. Just stamp it so I can leave. I have an appointment." David looked at me. I offered a small, apologetic smile, the picture of a daughter dealing with a difficult mother. He looked back at Cynthia, who was tapping her manicured nails on the desk. "All right," he said, reaching for his stamp. Thunk. The sound echoed in the quiet bank like a gavel strike. Cynthia stood up immediately, snatching the check from the desk. "Finally," she huffed. "Next time just wire it, Rose." This was exhausting. She turned and walked out without a backward glance. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say goodbye. She just took the money and left. I stayed seated while David gathered the papers. "Here's your copy," he said, handing me the deed. The stamp was fresh, the ink still wet. "Thanks, David," I said. "You have no idea how much this helps." I walked out of the bank with the deed in my hand. The cold Chicago air hit my face, but for the first time in 4 years I didn't feel the chill. I felt heat. The heat of ownership. The heat of victory. The house was mine. Not theoretically. Not emotionally. Legally. Every square inch of it belonged to me. Cynthia thought she had just secured a yacht for her golden boy. She didn't realize she had just signed her own eviction notice. I didn't go home to celebrate. I didn't call my friends. I got into my car and drove straight to the industrial district, pulling into the lot of Apex Property Solutions. I knew Apex through my work at the waste plant. They were the kind of predatory cash investors who bought meth labs, burned out shells, and hoarder houses sight unseen. They didn't care about curb appeal. They cared about speed and margins. I walked into the office and threw the deed onto the desk of the acquisitions manager, a guy named Mike who chewed nicotine gum and wore cheap cologne. 314 Oak Street, I said. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, freshly renovated kitchen. Market value is $450,000. Mike picked up the deed, checking the stamp. "I know the neighborhood. Nice area. What's the catch? Structural damage? Mold. Squatters," I said. "Stubborn ones. I don't want to deal with the eviction process. I want out. Today." Mike tapped his pen on the desk. "If I have to deal with occupants, I'm knocking 30% off the top. And I need immediate possession rights." "Done," I said. "I'll take $320,000 cash wire. But I have one condition. You execute the possession order tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Mike raised an eyebrow. "Tomorrow is Saturday." "Exactly," I said. "I want the emergency safety crew sent in. You know the drill. Asbestos check. Electrical hazard abatement. Make the property uninhabitable so they have to leave." Mike grinned, a shark seeing blood in the water. "You're cold, Rose. I like it. Sign here." I signed the sale contract. In less than 20 minutes, I had liquidated the only leverage my family had ever held over me. I wasn't the owner anymore. I was just the girl who lit the fuse. Saturday morning dawned bright and cold. I parked my car 3 houses down from my childhood home, watching through binoculars like a sniper waiting for the shot. The house was buzzing. A catering van was unloading trays. Brandon was on the porch, directing the setup of a balloon arch that spelled out future mogul. Cynthia was fluttering around in a silk robe, screaming at a florist about the shade of the hydrangeas. They were preparing for the coronation of the golden child. At 8 o'clock sharp, the cavalcade arrived. It wasn't the police. It was a fleet of 4 black heavy-duty pickup trucks with Apex Safety and Demolition stenciled on the sides. They pulled up onto the lawn, crushing the perfect grass and blocking the catering van. 6 men jumped out wearing hard hats, respirators, and tool belts. They didn't knock. They marched up the driveway with sledgehammers and drills. Cynthia ran out onto the porch, clutching her robe. "Excuse me. You can't park there. We have guests arriving in 2 hours. Move those trucks." The foreman, a man the size of a vending machine, ignored her. He walked past her and slapped a bright orange sticker on the front window. "Danger. Structure unsafe. Do not enter." "What are you doing?" Brandon shouted, running down the steps. "I'm a doctor. I'll call the police." "Go ahead," the foreman grunted. He held up a clipboard. We own this property as of yesterday. We have a permit for emergency asbestos abatement and electrical rewiring. This house is a fire hazard. Everyone out. Now. You're insane. Cynthia shrieked. This is my house. Not anymore, lady. Check the deed. The foreman signaled his guys. The sound that stayed with me wasn't shouting. It was the scream of a power drill. They weren't asking them to leave. They were dismantling the house. The front door came off its hinges. Then the windows. Then the breaker box. The lights died instantly. Inside, panic erupted, not fear of being homeless but fear of losing status. Cynthia wasn't crying about shelter. She was screaming about her party. Why guests? She shrieked as the furniture was dragged onto the snow. Neighbors watched from their porches. Her currency was image and it was being repossessed in real time. I didn't stay. The house was gone. The money was gone. The show was over. 3 weeks passed in silence. I returned to my routine, blocked every contact and told myself it was finished. It wasn't. On a Tuesday night in the employee parking garage, a luxury SUV swerved across the only exit and blocked me in. High beams blinded me. The driver's door flew open. It was Brandon, unkempt, unshaven, frantic. He stormed to my window and slammed his fist against the glass. Open the door, he screamed. You ruined everything. He wasn't begging. He was threatening. He accused me of theft, promised to plant evidence to call the police. He knew just enough about my job to make the lie stick. For a moment I was terrified, until I noticed his hands were shaking. He wasn't powerful. He was desperate. I didn't unlock the door. I picked up my phone and pressed it against the glass. The photo showed a plastic bag of shredded documents. His documents. His face drained of color. I reminded him of the day I cleaned his office, unjammed his shredder and taped the strips back together. Prescriptions for fake patients. Fraudulent insurance claims. Hidden income. I showed him the draft email, already addressed to the medical board and the FBI, with 40 attached scans. One step closer, I said calm and clear, and I hit send. He froze. Then he ran. I didn't send the email. The threat was enough. For now. 6 months later, peace had returned, until I found an IRS envelope addressed to Cynthia. Final notice. Audit. She hadn't reported the sale, the forgiven debt, or the cash she spent on a yacht deposit for a party that never happened. She wasn't just homeless, she was bankrupt and under federal investigation. I didn't forward the letter. I shredded it. I went home, cooked dinner and ate slowly in a warm, quiet room. For the first time in my life, I wasn't guarding someone else's house. I owned my peace.